Thank you, Chair. It's a great honor to be elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society. Kira, I'm an entomologist working with insects. As you may be aware, insects are the most diverse group of animals on this planet. They are directly related to our own survival because about a third of our diet is direct result of insect pollination. In the meantime, we lose at least a third of our crop production to insect pests annually, globally. A bit myself, I did my PhD in Australia, postdoc in California before joining Massey University in 1995. My research fields are insect behavior, biological control, systematics, and biogeography. Today I'm going to present a few examples of my applied research. First, biological control of Australian Eucalyptus borer. This beetle at the top was accidentally introduced to many parts of the world, killing large number of eucalyptus trees, particularly in California. Initially, Californians used all available measures to control the pests, including pesticides, but failed. At that point, our paths crossed. My task was to search for potential biological control agents for this particular borer. I spent about a year or so in Australia, and I discovered 4 parasitoids of this borer in Australia. And this borer worked collectively to suppress the borer's population. They didn't compete with each other because each species attacked a stage of larvae. So it worked synergistically, and their overall parasitism rate was about 80%, which was promising. So I introduced all 4 species to California. Eventually, 3 have established, but failed to control the pests. So I continue my search in Australia for more effective biological control agents, and eventually I found that the top one is a tiny wasp attacking the eggs of the borer. And the parasitism rate was very high, it's about 90% in the field. So I introduced it to California multiple times, and this species quickly suppressed the population. Within a year or so, suppressed the population to the level we consider as a complete control. So this success story floating around the world, many countries would like to introduce this parasitoid as well. Eventually, I believe Brazil and South Africa have introduced this parasitoid. So when the team started celebrating the success over 3 years already, a second borer invaded California and became a major pest. More importantly, this new borer killed the parasitoid of the previous borer. What happened was the previous borer was under control. The eggs were very rare in the field. The parasitoid of the previous borer turned to attack the new borer's eggs. But this new borer's eggs have very strong immune response against this parasitoid, killing almost all attackers. The major worry was if the previous borer, which was under control, resurged because of the removal of the parasitoid. Then there will be a major environmental disaster because both borers can work together to kill even more trees. So I was called again. Through thorough research, I zoomed in on a small rural town called Corowa in New South Wales. I rushed there, but on site I found a number of borer species, because it was a native site, number of borer species share the same habitat, even lay eggs on the same trunks. So I need to quickly design strategies to separate the eggs of the new borer in California from those of others. So I use cages like these. to separate that. The first trip was very successful. I found the new borer-specific parasitoid, but we couldn't introduce at the time. We needed permission, we need more research. So I went there next year using the methods I designed. Straight away, I got the parasitoid and shipped to California, hundreds of them, as they became established. In the following few years, the problem solved. So I need to emphasize that this successful story resulted from almost 20 years collaboration, international collaborations. Back to New Zealand, I've studied a number of parasitoids of a few important four important horticultural pests in New Zealand, and work with growers, a number of growers across the country. Globally, introduce biological control agents, only 10% successfully achieved complete control of pests. So most of them introduced, not successful. So my focus was on why they fail, whether we can make them effective. During the course of our study, we identified some species are genetically ineffective, which means there were wrong species introduced in the first place, like the first four species introduced. But some species that are genetically effective, but are rendered ineffective by human activities, particularly application of pesticides. And our findings allow us to make a number of recommendations to improve or to make those genetically effective biological control agents to be effective in New Zealand, contributing to long-term reduction of application of pesticides. Turning now to another topic, understanding insect reproductive behavior for development of behavior-based pest management. I've done a number of aspects. I list 4 here. First of all, sexually selected trees. As you're aware, mating is not random. Males and females need to assess each other very carefully before mating occurs. Males that carry those sexually selected trees are more successful in getting mates. So we have worked on a number of pest species. We identified those trees for a number of pest species. Our studies, our findings contribute to the development of effective sterile insect techniques for pest management. And sperm precedence, as you also may be aware, successful mating in insects does not necessarily translate into successful paternity, which means if a female mates with more than one male, it is critical to answer who will be the father of her children. And in insects, maybe the second male, or maybe the first male, depending on species. We have identified sperm precedents for a number of species, and particularly their mechanisms. Why it occur? Why the second male is the best male, or why the first male is the best male? And these findings are important for the development of insecticide resistant management. And cause of flirtation. Flirtation occurs in all animals with sexual reproduction, and particularly insects, because we focus on insects. We found occasional flirtation is okay, but constant, intensive flirtation costs male dearly. What happens is the female perform a lot of flirtations, they will have much lower reproductive output. They will have fewer mates, they will have fewer sperm. So eventually they are going to have fewer children. These findings are important for the design of effective mating disruption strategies using sex pheromones. Finally, mating is costly to females in insects. We found similar fluid without any sperm, just seminal fluid, reduce female longevity by 50% and can prevent her from mating. So these findings are important for future development of novel biopesticides. And finally, I would like to thank many people, my colleagues, my students, and particularly my family. They are here for their love and support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
When you get the parasites in, why doesn't it settle down into kind of an endemic predator-prey relationship? So, there is enough prey for the predators, but it never, they never get completely go away because the predator still needs enough to prey on.
Exactly. Biological control, we don't aim to eradicate the organisms. If we want to practice biological control, we need to learn to live with certain level of pests. So we're talking about complete control. Probably if we achieve 90%, for example, or in California, the California case was about 95%. But pests are still around. It's just very few. I wouldn't cause economic sort of concern or social concern. So that situation we consider is complete control. Thank you.
Other questions?
So how do you actually know that introducing a new species doesn't create other problems? I mean, is there a whole checklist you have to go through before you introduce it? Or
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. We have introduced too many species across the world. We have caused some problems. I mean, even in New Zealand, we have a lot of problems because of the introduction of not necessarily insects, some plants, for example, we have a lot of problems. But other part of the world, they have the same situation, almost equal situation. The community, we have the native community, then the reason we introduce biological control agents is because there's mostly as introduced pests attacking either native or introduced plant. New Zealand is a typical example because most of our crops are introduced plants. And most of pests are introduced. Particularly, I'm talking about horticulture. Almost all of them are introduced. So we have make the ecosystem unbalanced. And then we have to introduce something to make it balance again. So this is basically the fundamental theory about the biological control. We make things in balance, we try to balance back. And we're continuing doing these kind of things. The consequence for long term would be the world, if particularly the weather, suitable weather zones will probably share almost the same species in long term. Either accidentally introduced or deliberately introduced. We unbalance the things and balance back. So gradually, because of human trade and so on, and travel, so things will become so-called native species. Wouldn't be native because it will be around the world. So that's a good question because there's the consequences of this kind of continuous introductions. Thank you.
And that sense of balance is being shifted by climate change all the time,
Absolutely.
right? And so you hear stories about entire forests being decimated because a particular beetle now can undergo 2 life cycles instead of 1, or things like that.
Yes.
Is that an opportunity or a challenge, or both for your type of research, for your field?
I think both. So that's an unfortunate change. We can't do anything about it. We're now talking about climate change. We probably can slow down the process. Whether we can achieve the goal by the end of this century, we don't know. But obviously, because of the climate change, everything moved. And particularly the plants and animals move polarized, basically to both sides. And cross the equator probably by humans, because of international trade and travel. We just simply introduce everything from everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you. Please
Yeah.
join me in thanking Professor Wang, but also
Thank you.
all of our amazing speakers. We've once again had a fantastic session that I think really highlights the depth, the excellence, and the type of excellence, how broad and inspiring it is here. So welcome to all the new fellows, and drinks. I hope you find a good Sauv Blanc. Thank you.